welcome to the first ever episode of the Genero podcast. It's a podcast where we're going to bring on different guests, experts, to talk about the topic of how to create profitable growth through digital channels and tools and means. Before we get started, I want to say a couple of thank yous. So first, thanks to Kim and Hannes for producing. Thanks to Suvi for the visuals, Tor for the audio, Kent for the name, Sebastian for the idea for the podcast, and also a shout out to Benjamin. Appropriately enough, for the first episode, we have our very own Christopher Oksman with us.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
If you could just say a couple of words about yourself, what you do at Genero, background, etc.
Yeah, I started at Genero 2014, I think it was. Back then as
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years soon. 9
years, yeah.
Yeah, soon, yeah. And I started out as a growth hacker and been since then working with everything from own paid earned media, building the websites to executing on advertising marketing, and lately working more with the strategic work, creating strategies, roadmaps, etc., and making sure companies are executing accordingly. And since a few years back, I'm a partner as well, so I've been working a bit more with management, and today operating as like a country manager for Sweden as well, since we started the branch. Was it today? In 2 years, it will be 3 years since we started it. 1st of February.
Yeah, it was
so it will be 3 years.
Just before
celebration now.
Lockdowns.
Just before lockdown.
Yeah, good timing.
Yes.
So you've been working really broadly across a lot of different verticals and markets. Also a lot with e-commerce, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
We're recording this in January 2023, and a big topic that's on everyone's mind, everyone talking about, is profitability and profitable growth in these some kind of difficult or challenging times. So if you could just set the stage, what's happened in the marketplace when it comes to e-commerce and consumer behavior, what's been the change and what are we seeing right now?
Yeah, well, I guess it started a few years back when COVID hit in a way. Yeah, already then. And people started to move to more online as well. For many companies, it was a boost, while for some companies, it wasn't as lucky timing. Of course, we changed the behavior of what we bought and what we consumed and how we lived our life, which affected, of course, sales for different companies, which then created logistic issues or challenges, etc., etc. And some companies went back instead, 10 years in market size, while some grew a lot. And all that started to shift behavior in a way, and created this way of working. And then now instead, this last year we got the war started, and then we have the energy crisis, we have the inflation going on, and so on, and that changes the whole thing in another way. We have companies that been focusing highly on growth, not too much on the profitability. Some will get a challenge with that now, some not. And then we can see companies that been growing decently needs sometimes to start focusing more on the profitability in a way, looking further than the revenue when doing marketing and optimizing and so on.
So in 2020, there was a big lift in all e-commerce markets, basically, because a lot of the online, the physical world, retail shut down. And so there's a big boost in online and lots of demand, not a lot of thinking about profitability, and just focused on grabbing market share and customer acquisition. And now they have to think about how to actually turn those profitable. I guess the first, what are some of the opportunities, generally speaking, when it comes to an environment like this, when there is a lot of uncertainty, maybe some fear? For companies, how should they be thinking about this?
The market in general, as we start to see, is that of course it's maybe not as competitive. Depends on the market, of course, what you are selling, what you're doing, but we can see that advertisers take down the budget a little bit, and it's less competitive to advertise in some areas. But then again, it also depends on the market itself. Like, is the market actually going down as well? Then that balances it a little bit. But then also, like, it's an opportunity in different ways that, like, we'll see, like, you can of course advertise for a lower cost, but it will also change the market in general, like what companies will be there in the end, because we can start see reports of companies going bankrupt, getting into bankruptcy, unfortunately, and that is of course sad, but at the same time it sort of creates an opportunity as well for some on the market. It's like a bit similar as well, like as with COVID, like, because, and if not just looking at the e-com market in a way, like many companies started to cut their budget. They didn't make any decisions. They were careful what they were actually investing in. But even if it's like, usually when it comes times like this, there are opportunities like behind it. Like, so even if wasn't able to get sales during that time period, like accommodation, for example, you could build up for the time to come. In a way, and that's maybe an opportunity now for some companies as well to look at your own channels, your retention and customer base and all that, and make it better, which you might not have focused too much on during a time period where like revenue has been the main focus to bring in short time, like putting in marketing budgets towards advertising and so on. But building that up instead, which will increase the margin because you're not paying to bring those in. It's just the work hours you have to put in, sort of. And then when you get out of this time period, you can continue to scale with media budget, and you will have much more profitable baseline to go from.
So you could look at this as a great opportunity. You're being forced to improve profitability, improve margins, which is going to serve you now and later. And as you highlighted, like in a time like this, there are opportunities because some companies are going to be cutting back. Advertising is going to be, we've already seen a little bit of this, but and we don't know how it's going to play out, but there's a large likelihood that advertising will be relatively comparably, like it will be less expensive. So there might be opportunity for grabbing market share. And I think also a good thing to point out when it comes to the market overall is that e-commerce penetration is probably going to keep going up. And I think we're recording this in Finland, and the Finnish e-commerce penetration is like half compared to Sweden, Norway, Denmark. So in Finland, there's a long way to go. Just that's going to keep growing. And so the overall market for whatever category you're in might be shrinking, but if the e-commerce proportion of that is increasing, then that opens up opportunities for growth as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the risks and challenges as well. So like what are the biggest risks right now that companies need to be aware of just from marketing profitability standpoint?
Yeah, the main risk is not to have enough money, right? I would say. So being careful about that, like making sure you're actually looking at the right numbers in a way. Many companies like been looking at like the revenue and the ROAS on that, for example. But like if it's so that the margin is getting more important, then of course you should maybe start to switch your focus a little bit to the right KPIs.
What would be, so if revenue growth and ROAS were like, or maybe revenue growth as like the most important metric during this time of growth, what would be a more appropriate metric to look at now?
Yeah, so like depends of course how you can measure and your approach, sort of. But like if you start with the old-fashioned way of revenue and ROAS, like you might call it like total ROAS or MER or whatever, like advertising cost divided by or the revenue divided by the advertising cost. But at the same time, you could look at the margin instead, because like if you are, for example, an e-com that has like high revenue periods during like Black Friday and sales periods, and that's sort of what brings in the majority of your revenue, the margin might not always be that good if you haven't like, well, it depends on your logistic, of course. If you have purchased product in for that period with a lower cost, of course you can get better margin then. But in general, like if you cut the price from the original and then you get up the revenue, the ROAS of that might not be as good. So one approach could be then to like actually start looking at the margin that you get in and measuring that, following it up like on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, whatever. But you could actually use that. You could take the margin and replace the revenue with the margin instead in what you're doing. So as an example, instead of pushing revenue as a conversion value to Google Ads, let's say, you could push the margin instead. And even including like the other costs to it. And then of course, starting to keep in mind like return as well, and those kind of things, because it's a delay, but it's something to really look into now, maybe to decrease those that return 60% of the time and try to increase the part that only returns 30% or whatever.
Yeah, and that's like the returns can be a big cost. Like that can kill the business. And it feels like, I mean, these are, when you say it, it sounds very obvious, but it feels like a lot of businesses haven't really gone to the trouble of really calculating, as I said, including all costs, all variable costs, and really calculating the margins conservatively, as opposed to using these more optimistic numbers, because they haven't had to. And so just like that thing alone of going through that exercise of really calculating what your actual margins are, with realistic expectations when it comes to returns, et cetera, that could probably give you a really good picture, or a different picture of like how well is your marketing performance today. Is it actually profitable when you look at the real numbers, real margin? And of course, this varies how complicated it needs to be depending on your business. Like if you're an e-commerce, like a D2C, and you have a few products or one even, it's pretty straightforward. Of course. But if you have like multi-brands store, thousands of products, you need some automation on that as well. So then it goes into your technical, like the stack you have, like what kind of website do you have, and CRM and everything, like how are they gonna support this kind of approach? Because in the end, it's even good to have this approach in a market that is growing and is healthy in a way, because going back to the example with Google Ads, it doesn't hurt to send the margin instead of the revenue there. It will just make sure that you're continuing to grow in the pace you want, but with the margin, taking in the margin into account in a way. So it's just positive sides of that. In a way. How should companies be thinking about like a lifetime value? Compared to
and that's the other thing. So then comes like the lifetime value is one approach as well. And of course it might be tricky to look at the actual lifetime value of like if you have like a few years, like a customer stays for a few years, it's not like really relevant maybe to look into in short time period. So then it's the approach of like looking at 60 days lifetime value, for example. Or if you have an e-com and your goal is to get returning customers, and let's say the belief is that if they buy 3 times, they are loyal customers. And that could be doable in 3 months, so that would be 90 days. So then you could take that approach instead and look at like, okay, what is our average today, and where do we want to go with this like 90 days lifetime value, and look at it in that way. And then you take the margin into account as well as the lifetime value, and you start to see paths in your marketing where you're actually gonna grow more profitable and sustainable in a way. So that's the next level. But you could also do it the other way around, that you take that way of doing it instead of the margin approach to start with.
I think one thing you mentioned there about keeping the LTV window very short, it's really important because, well, first, very few companies have even, I think, the required data to be able to confidently say what the LTV is. And then also, like, if your LTV figures are based on 2020, 2021, and now we're in 2023, the consumer behavior is going to look maybe a lot different. So if you're looking at like, in 2021 we had annual LTV of 500 euros. And then all of a sudden this year, it might be 250. And you only find that out in November when you've spent on this customer acquisition. So just keeping the LTV like very conservative maybe, or very tight.
Yeah.
Otherwise you could run into some trouble with cash flow.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And of course, like any price adjustments that's been going on and so on will also affect if you look at too long time period in a way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then you start to see those paths, like how to bundle products or whatever, like what would be because maybe the first purchase is not too big. Like it's just to get the customer in, and then you upsell, cross-sell, and so on, and increase that 90 days lifetime value instead.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about like kind of, it seems like obvious things, but I feel like a lot of companies have, again, just going from that growth to profit mindset has been it's really key, because I was talking to someone a couple of days ago, and she mentioned how in their business, it was very clear that the campaigns that they did, the discounting campaigns that they did to attract customers drove a lot of volume, but the LTV and also then the payback period was much, much worse.
Yeah.
So you are in a situation where you've gone from like maybe having targets, having everyone focus on just like these activities and campaigns that drive the revenue and short-term revenue spikes.
Yeah.
And now you have to actually stop all of that. And it can be a hard adjustment, like psychologically, but also when it comes to the incentive structures in the company and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and and then of course it varies then like on your business as well. Like if you're like plain like e-com in a way, or if you're like subscription based, you're maybe more used to this approach in a way.
Yeah.
Because you have the churn and everything that you've been hopefully following.
Yeah.
And that is becoming more important, and this is just adding like an extra level to it, so that the acquisition part sort of takes into account what's happening after.
Yeah.
In a way. But yeah.
What are some kind of, so now we talked about the importance of focusing on profitability and LTV, possibly like making sure that you actually understand what marketing is generating and what you can afford to spend. What would be some opportunities for companies to just reduce unnecessary marketing expense? Like, are there any basic kind of opportunities where you can cut it without having any like real big direct measurable impact on revenue?
Yeah, good question. I guess it would vary in a way for your business, and most likely these numbers that we talked about would identify a lot of it in a way where to start, like, or cutting, I don't know, but like at least reallocating budget and focus in a way where to bring in more valuable customers. And of course, like if we look at the own channel again, I would guess like it will bring that long time value for you also. So working with the SEO part, and we have a bit of an opportunity at the same time with technology at this point, with like AI coming into the picture. So what can we actually do? Cut our time in half or even more, and grow our organic channels, for example.
And there's like, you can do that trade-off between just like the cost of labor versus like the media spend, and it feels like, especially in the last 3 years when there's been such very strong demand, there's been a push to focus a lot on paid acquisition, paid channels, because it's instant. And so the media budgets have gone up a lot. Teams have maybe stayed quite small, and so now there's an opportunity to focus more on the channels that drive organic channels. Because it does feel like that's a big, like an e-commerce brand would need to be quite large before they really start taking SEO. That's been my experience. SEO seriously. For the first, like, maybe they do something, but it's not really focused. Like paid has been really the main engine for growth.
But if you cut that out now, you are sort of on zero. Do you have a bad churn as well? We're gonna go bankrupt.
That we don't want. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so let's say you're talking to an e-commerce company brand who says that now times are tough. It's much more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain an old one. So we're just going to slash our marketing expense, completely stop doing customer acquisition because it's so expensive and risky, and just focus on existing customers, retention, and activation, and growing kind of that pie. What would you say to that?
We'll go bankrupt in the end. No, but it's not maybe the best approach either, because you need both worlds in a way, because they're not gonna stay forever in the end. Of course, we need to optimize our customer base and retention and so on, but it's gonna decline if we just focus on that. So we need the new customers as well, and you most likely have bad customers as well in your portfolio. So you need to continue to bring in the good ones, sort of. So there need to be a balance between those two.
Yeah. It's very interesting because there's research showing that it's quite difficult with marketing to try to influence consumer behavior, like customer behavior. So like the classic example is loyalty programs. The problem is that customers who are really loyal, they notice it and they use it, but they were still going to buy from you. So you just give up free margin. And most customers who are not very loyal, excuse me, and not very active, they don't even notice it. So it doesn't change anyone's purchasing behavior. It just gives away free margin. So if you take that approach or that kind of thinking, that it's mostly about bringing in new customers, and then some will become really valuable, stay with us for a long time, and others will be a one-time purchase, and that's fine. It's
like, especially if looking at the existing customer base, it's good to not take the price too much in, like look at how you can keep them longer with value instead, like sort of.
And probably an interesting opportunity that it's not marketing, but if you want to if you want to unlock more value from your existing customer base, then product development. Expanding the product portfolio is one thing that you can actually do. And also, like in that case, like bring in the customers sort of as well, and listen more at these times, like listen to the customers more and understand, and try to like improve the funnel and the retention and like delighting the customer by doing so, and develop the products and have good support and so on. Rather than cutting the price. And so what you mentioned there is like those are things that I guess a lot of companies are tempted to where they are tempted to reduce costs, like support and all these things, and so it can save money today, but you're borrowing from the future. It might be a bit tricky when you kind of. So essentially, like, don't try to milk all your customers, like get everything, squeeze all the value you can, because that's going to be very short term, and then you're in a bad place. So we talked about products and portfolio. So knowing that we don't want to just completely stop focusing on customer acquisition, what are some ways, some tools, some strategies we can use for lowering the CAC without necessarily just attracting very illoyal and unvaluable customers? Like, what are some ways we can do that?
In the end, so like, of course, CAC we can lower, but then is the ROAS as well, like that we want to increase at the same time for an e-com then, most likely, or customer lifetime value. So depending on the approach then, but like if sticking to the customer acquisition cost then, and without taking price into consideration, like we could start by jumping back to the existing customers and really understand them, and why are the loyal customers actually loyal, and what do they value, and what kind of information can we get from there. I think we are really poor at asking that from, like, I think it's a general thing that we're not looking too much into our existing customers, but as we've been into acquiring new customers has been the focus. But I think an answer lays there as well. So I think it's good to take that into account, and then like really understand the customers, the value that we have and what makes us unique, and try to build that into the communication. So we have like a framework for that, and continuously test like what we are advertising then to bring down the new customer acquisition cost in terms of advertising. And continuously, like, just continue to test, be there, don't stick, like, try to be outside your comfort zone. Yeah, that's the word. And yeah, I think that's definitely important. And not only test like the communication itself, but also the technical stuff behind it, even if it's like a much lower percentage of the effect nowadays. But still, like, if we look at Meta as a channel, it varies what kind of tactic you have on the channel, works for different accounts and sizes and so on.
Yeah.
So do test that. And then, well, to bring down the new customer acquisition costs, you will have to pay for the advertising customer, or like the customers to come in for advertising, but then you have the SEO and other channels to look into as well, and build your own channel, get these like free customers, or how to say it, and in that way bring down the new customer acquisition cost in total.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Is like the company who is investing in ways of bringing down the blended cost, with whether it's SEO to drive that quote unquote free traffic, or CRO to maximize the value of each visit, etc. They have a lower blended cost, and so they can afford to spend more on the paid than some of their competitors who are just looking at paid. And so then you're putting yourself in a position where you might be the only one who's able to, or you might be able to outbid your competitors on Google Shopping or like search, something that's really like demand capture. So it's like you have to look at the big picture, blended CAC. And obviously, as you said, not just focus on the CAC, but actually make sure that you're maximizing like the contribution margin from those customers, or whatever period you're using. Okay, so is there anything in terms of, you mentioned pushing your margins as opposed to your revenue numbers to Google, for instance, for optimizing. Is there anything kind of in the ways of concrete steps companies can take when it comes to taking this margin focused approach to digital marketing?
Yeah, that's one. Like to start putting like the margin, for example, as one, or if possible, then lifetime value, 90 days. But then we could use that kind of data in everything we do. Like we could like mark the products that do have good margin, or we know ourselves well, and structure everything we do according to these kind of things. So we could have a set of products that have like really great margin. We can pay more to acquire a company through that if we look a little bit short term, and we could have those that actually do not have good margin, and it's not profitable to sell them, but we have them. We could see, should we have them to start with, but like then also we shouldn't maybe push too much money on that, especially if they don't bring in the long time value.
Yeah, it feels like again, it sounds very obvious, but how many companies are actually segmenting their like top of funnel customer acquisition campaigns to account for different margins for different products, and different also lifetime values depending on different products. I mean, obviously now we're talking about companies that have, it would be if you have just the one product, it's quite straightforward. That would be a good solution actually. Just have one product.
Skip the rest.
That would actually help make it a lot easier. But so to kind of wrap it up, I mean, I feel like a big step here is laying the foundation. With it, before we even start talking about like marketing channels and tactics and tools, is like having that really solid understanding of the margins, whatever LTV number we're using, how they interact, how different maybe, again, if you have multiple different products, how different buyers from different categories, there might be some large differences. Because if you have that understanding, then I think you can do a lot more than your competitors, which may react with panic and just cut everything.
Exactly.
Or maybe they just keep spending in unprofitable places, or spending too much.
And it's not too complicated to do this in the end. That's the thing. It's just not. We haven't looked there too much. But
We
it's the same
to.
thing. But it's just under numbers that we're looking into, and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So understanding the margins, taking a margin approach to marketing, and then using some of these tactics and some of these other maybe neglected tools like organic or CRO, retention, to unlock more value from the traffic that you're going to be driving to the store.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Any kind of last thoughts? Again, we're recording this in January 2023. What are your expectations when it comes to 2023, the e-commerce industry here in Finland, Sweden, and beyond? What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to be an interesting time, at least.
For sure.
Yeah, because what we talked about is not the only thing that's happening. Of course, we have all the tracking and everything that's changing the landscape as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be an interesting time, and another year to focus on your baseline sort of a bit more and create a good stable ground to stand on when continuing the growth.
I think that was a good point you brought up, is like maybe expectations need to be a bit more measured, because if you have the expectation that we're going to keep growing a lot, then you're going to make some reckless, maybe risky decisions. But I think it's very acceptable and smart to have the kind of expectation that today, if we can do profitable growth, that's great, but we're just going to try to stability.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep it stable, acquire new customers, figure out the margins, figure out what's actually profitable in our marketing, maybe cut out like the 80% that we're doing right now, which isn't really that profitable. Like that would be a really good outcome for 2023, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
So having those expectations, I think, is key.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year for sure.
Yeah.
We'll look back at this in 1 year and see how wrong we got it.
Yeah, exactly. It will be like COVID period, but a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure.
More to think about.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Christopher, for taking time.
Thank you.
And that's the end of the first episode.